You have 10 minutes to decide whether you still want to be part of this family.
What exactly are you asking me to decide? Inside that envelope is the presidency of the company, controlling shares, the waterfront house, and your full inheritance.
What is the condition?
David must end his marriage to you before midnight.
David, you don't have to choose. I'll leave.
You have 8 minutes remaining.
I don't need 8 minutes.
David, do you understand what you've just thrown away?
Yes, but before this night is over, everyone in this room will understand what you tried to hide.
My husband's family believed their money made his decision obvious. They expected him to abandon me and protect the Bennett name. But David had entered that dining room carrying a secret of his own, and his answer would bring their entire family empire crashing down. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. My name is Camille Bennett, and until that night, I believed the worst thing my husband's family could do was make me feel unwelcome. I had no idea they had been quietly rearranging our lives from the beginning. I met David Bennett 12 years earlier at a community arts fundraiser in Charleston, South Carolina. I was 33, recently divorced from a man who had taught me how lonely a person could feel inside a marriage. David was 36, reserved, observant, and completely different from the loud businessman who filled the ballroom that evening. I was working as an elementary school counselor and volunteering at the fundraiser because the proceeds supported music programs in underfunded schools. David had donated several instruments through his family's manufacturing company, Bennett Coastal Industries. At the time, I did not know how wealthy his family was. I only knew he stood alone near a display of children's paintings, staring at one picture longer than all the others. It was a drawing of a little girl standing between two houses. One house was large and perfect, with tall white columns. The other was small, crooked, and glowing yellow through the windows. The girl had drawn herself walking toward the smaller house. David asked me why I thought she had chosen it. Because warmth is more important than size, I replied. He looked at me and smiled as though I had answered a question he had been carrying for years. We talked for nearly 2 hours. He asked about my work, my students, and the grandmother who had raised me after my mother died. He listened without interrupting. When the event ended, he walked me to my car and asked if I would have coffee with him. Our relationship developed slowly. David was careful with his feelings, but once he trusted someone, he loved with a steadiness I had never experienced. He remembered every small detail. He brought peach tea to my office because I had mentioned liking it once. He fixed the broken latch on my grandmother's porch without telling anyone. When one of my students lost his father, David quietly paid for the child's summer music camp. 6 months after we began dating, he invited me to Sunday dinner at his parents' home. The Bennett estate sat behind iron gates on several acres outside Charleston. The house was enormous, with white columns, stone fountains, and gardens maintained by people whose names David's mother probably did not know. Everything inside looked expensive enough to be displayed in a museum. David's father, Richard Bennett, greeted me with a firm handshake and immediately asked where I had gone to college. His mother, Vivian, looked me over from my shoes to my hair before offering a smile that never reached her eyes. David's younger sister, Claire, arrived late and kissed him on the cheek as though they had been separated for years instead of several days. She barely acknowledged me. During dinner, Vivian asked about my family. "My grandmother raised me," I said. "She lives in Somerville." "And your father?" she asked. "I never knew him." Vivian placed her fork down carefully. "How unfortunate." The words sounded sympathetic, but her expression suggested she had discovered a defect. Richard asked what my grandmother did for a living. "She was a seamstress," I said proudly. "She owned a small alterations shop for nearly 30 years. Claire glanced at her mother. It lasted only a second, but I saw it. At the end of the evening, Vivian hugged me lightly and said, "David has always had a generous heart, sometimes too generous." On the drive home, I told David his family did not like me. "They don't know you yet," he said. They already think they do. He reached for my hand. My mother judges everyone. It isn't personal. But it was personal. It would become more personal with every passing year. When David proposed 11 months later, he took me back to the community center where we had met. The building was empty except for the children's paintings from the previous fundraiser. The drawing of the two houses had been framed and placed on an easel. He knelt beneath it and asked me to build a warm home with him. I said yes before he finished the question. His family's reaction was polite but strained. Richard congratulated us. Claire said the engagement had happened quickly, even though we had been together for almost a year. Vivian stared at the ring and asked David whether he was certain he did not want a longer engagement. David told her he had never been more certain of anything. That should have comforted me. Instead, it seemed to make Vivian more determined. She tried to control the wedding from the first week. She selected a country club without asking us, created a guest list filled with business associates, and arranged a meeting with a wedding planner who kept referring to the ceremony as the Bennett event. I wanted a smaller wedding at the church my grandmother attended. David agreed. When we told Vivian, she became quiet. "You are the future of this family company," she told David. "Your wedding reflects all of us." "It reflects Camille and me," he answered. Vivian turned to me. "Of course. But marriage is not only about two people when one of them carries a family name." I should have understood the warning hidden in that sentence. We married on a warm September afternoon in a small stone church filled with white roses and candlelight. My grandmother Ruth walked me down the aisle. David cried when he saw me. For those few minutes there was no company, no inheritance, and no Bennett reputation. There was only the man I loved waiting for me. At the reception, Vivian gave a speech welcoming me into the family. Everyone applauded. Then she added, "We look forward to seeing how Camille grows into the responsibilities that come with being David's wife." My grandmother squeezed my hand beneath the table. "Some women welcome you with open arms," she whispered. "Others welcome you so they can measure where to place the knife." I laughed softly at the time. Years later I would remember every word. David and I moved into a renovated house near the water. It belonged to a Bennett family trust, but David said his father had promised it would eventually become ours. The house was beautiful, though I never completely felt that it belonged to me. Vivian had chosen much of the furniture before we moved in. She came by without calling. She rearranged cabinets, replaced curtains, and once hired landscapers to remove a garden I had planted because she said the flowers looked unstructured. David confronted her each time. She always apologized to him, never to me. The first 2 years of our marriage were mostly happy. I continued working at the elementary school, and David became vice president of operations at Bennett Coastal Industries. He was respected by the employees because he knew their names and listened to their concerns. Unlike Richard, who believed loyalty could be demanded, David believed it had to be earned. His family expected me to leave my job and devote myself to charitable events connected to the company. Vivian said counseling children was admirable, but unnecessary now that I was married to David. "My work is not a hobby," I told her. She smiled. "Neither is representing this family." I refused to resign. That was the first decision Vivian never forgave. The second was our struggle to have children. David and I wanted a family. During the first year we did not worry. During the second we began tracking dates and scheduling appointments. By the third, every pregnancy announcement from a friend brought happiness followed by a private ache. The doctors found no clear reason we could not conceive. We tried medication, procedures, and 2 rounds of fertility treatment. Both failed. David held me through every disappointment. He never blamed me. He never allowed me to blame myself for long. His family was less gentle. Vivian began making comments about the future of the Bennett name. Richard suggested David had responsibilities beyond his personal happiness. Claire, who had married young and had 2 children, filled family gatherings with stories about motherhood while Vivian watched my face. At Christmas dinner one year, Vivian announced that she had preserved David's childhood nursery for the day his son would use it. The room became silent. David said, "Mother, enough." She looked surprised. I was only being hopeful. You were being cruel. It was one of the few times he challenged her in front of everyone. I loved him for it. I also hated that defending me always seemed to cost him something. After our second failed fertility treatment, David and I discussed adoption. We attended informational meetings and began the long process. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful. When Vivian learned about it, she visited our home the next morning. She sat across from me in the living room and said she wanted to speak woman to woman. A child does not need to share our blood to deserve love, I told her before she could begin. Love is not the only issue, she replied. David carries responsibilities. The company will eventually pass to him, and then to his children. Our child would be his child. Legally, perhaps. I stood. I think you should leave. She remained seated. You have changed him, Camille. Before you, David understood duty. Before me, he was afraid to disappoint you. Her expression hardened. For one brief moment, the polished mask disappeared. You are temporary, she said. The Bennett family is not. When David came home, I told him everything. He called his mother and demanded an apology. She refused. For nearly 4 months, we stopped attending family dinners. Then Richard suffered a mild heart attack. David returned to the family immediately. He visited the hospital every day and temporarily assumed more responsibility at the company. I understood. Richard was his father. Vivian used the crisis to rebuild her influence. She began calling David constantly. She reminded him that Richard's health meant David might soon lead the company. She arranged private meetings with lawyers and board members. She spoke about legacy, stability, and sacrifice. At the same time, strange problems began appearing in our adoption process. A home study appointment was canceled because the agency claimed we had withdrawn. Financial documents disappeared from our online application. An anonymous complaint alleged that David traveled excessively and that our marriage was unstable. The claims were investigated and dismissed, but each one delayed the process. I began to suspect Vivian. David initially resisted the idea. My mother can be controlling, he said, but she would never interfere with a child's future. You didn't hear the way she spoke about adoption. I believe you. I just don't believe she would go that far. His reluctance hurt more than I admitted. He defended me openly, but some part of him still needed to believe his mother had limits. Eventually, the adoption process collapsed. The agency did not reject us, but after almost 2 years of delays and emotional exhaustion, we withdrew. I cried for 3 days. David looked broken too, though he tried to hide it. Not long after, my grandmother became ill. Ruth had been the one constant in my life. She had taught me to sew, cook, pray, and leave any room where my dignity was treated as optional. When her kidneys began failing, I reduced my hours at the school to care for her. David supported me without hesitation. He paid for home health assistance and visited Ruth every evening he could. She adored him, though she never fully trusted his family. One afternoon while David was at work, Ruth asked me whether I was happy. Yes, I said. She shook her head. That was too quick. I love my husband. I didn't ask whether you loved him. I looked away. She reached for my hand. A good man can still be standing inside a bad family. The question is whether he will walk out when the fire starts. At the time I defended David. I told her he had chosen me repeatedly. Ruth smiled sadly. Then perhaps the day will never come when he has to choose all at once. She died 3 months later. At her funeral, David stood beside me from beginning to end. Vivian attended but left before the burial because she had a charity luncheon. Richard sent flowers from the company. Claire did not come because one of her children had a soccer tournament. Something changed in me after Ruth's death. I no longer had the energy to beg for acceptance from people determined to misunderstand me. I stopped attending every Bennett dinner. I declined committee invitations from Vivian. I returned to work full-time and started a mentorship program for girls being raised by grandparents. David was proud of me. His family accused me of pulling away. Our marriage remained loving, but pressure from the company consumed more of David's time. Richard refused to retire completely, though his health continued declining. He treated David like a successor in public and an employee in private. David worked 60-hour weeks. He answered calls during dinner and woke before dawn to review reports. I watched the warmth slowly leave his face. Whenever I suggested he step back, he said the company employed more than 800 people. If I walk away, my father will promote people who care only about profit, he said. Those families depend on someone inside the room speaking for them. I understood. That was the kind of man he was. But his loyalty made him easy to manipulate. The ultimatum began taking shape several months before it was delivered. First, Vivian invited David to lunch without me. Then Richard began discussing a formal succession plan. Claire started appearing at company events more frequently, even though she had never shown much interest in the business. At family gatherings, conversations stopped when I entered the room. One Sunday, I overheard Claire tell Vivian, "He won't do it unless he believes the company is at risk." Vivian noticed me in the hallway and immediately changed the subject. I told David what I had heard. He promised to ask his father about it. That evening, Richard claimed they were discussing a restructuring plan. David accepted the explanation, but I saw uncertainty in his eyes. 2 weeks later, our bank contacted us about a loan application made using David's personal information. The application had been submitted for a property investment valued at nearly $4 million. David had never seen it. The signature looked like his. The bank froze the application and opened an investigation. Richard called it an administrative mistake. He explained that someone in the company's finance office had used an old authorization form. David was furious. For the first time, he hired an independent attorney without informing his family. That decision changed everything. The attorney's name was Marcus Green. He had worked in corporate compliance for 20 years and had no connection to the Bennett family. David asked him to investigate the loan application discreetly. Marcus discovered that it was not an isolated mistake. For years, several properties had been purchased through shell companies connected to Bennett Coastal Industries. David's name appeared on guarantees and authorizations he had never signed. Funds had moved through accounts he did not know existed. Some transactions benefited Richard. Others benefited Claire and her husband. If the deals failed, David could be held responsible. When David confronted his father privately, Richard denied wrongdoing. "You are misunderstanding standard business arrangements," he said. "My signature was forged. Your signature was authorized." "By whom?" "By the people who built the company you expect to inherit." David came home that night and sat in the dark for almost an hour. I had never seen him look so defeated. He told me everything. "Then leave," I said. He stared at me. "Leave the company," I continued. "We can sell this house. We can live somewhere smaller. You can build something of your own." He rubbed his hands across his face. "It isn't that simple. It is not easy, but it is simple. If I accuse my father publicly, the company could collapse. If you remain silent, they may destroy you with it." He looked toward the window. "I need time," he said. His family made sure he would not have much. Vivian's 70th birthday was approaching. She planned an elaborate dinner at the Bennett estate and insisted that all immediate family attend. David considered refusing, but Marcus advised him not to reveal how much he knew. We went. That evening, the house glowed beneath hundreds of lights. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Waiters carried champagne through rooms filled with executives, politicians, and family friends. Vivian wore a silver gown and greeted guests like royalty. To everyone else, the Bennetts were celebrating a beloved matriarch. To me, it felt like a performance arranged before an execution. During dinner, Vivian praised Richard, Claire, and the company. She spoke about family unity and the importance of protecting what previous generations had built. Then she turned toward David. "My son has always been the heart of this family," she said. "Tonight, we hope he will remember that a heart cannot survive after it cuts itself away from the body." Several guests looked confused. David placed his napkin on the table. "Mother, what is this?" Vivian nodded toward Richard. He stood and asked the non-family guests to move into the adjoining ballroom for dessert. The doors closed behind them, leaving only David, me, Richard, Vivian, Claire, Claire's husband, and 2 family attorneys. One attorney placed a cream-colored envelope in front of David. Vivian folded her hands. "We have reached a point where decisions must be made," she said. David did not touch the envelope. "What decisions?" Richard answered. "The board is prepared to name you president next month. We are also transferring controlling shares to you." Claire shifted in her chair but said nothing. Richard continued. "The waterfront house will be placed in your name, along with the family property on Sullivan's Island. Your trust will become fully accessible." David looked at the attorney. "What is the condition?" Vivian's eyes moved toward me. "Our family cannot continue living under hostility," she said. "Camille has isolated you from us, resisted every tradition, and filled your head with suspicion." I almost laughed from disbelief. David's voice became cold. "What is the condition?" Richard tapped the envelope. "You separate from Camille tonight. The attorneys will handle the formal process. You will remain at the estate while arrangements are made." I felt the room tilt. Claire looked down at her plate. Vivian leaned closer to David. "This does not need to become ugly. We will provide Camille with a generous settlement." "A settlement?" I repeated. She ignored me. "You have sacrificed enough," she told David. "You wanted children. You wanted a stable home. You wanted a wife who could stand beside you in this family. Instead, you have spent 12 years defending someone who has never tried to belong." I looked at David. He was staring at his mother with an expression I could not read. Richard removed a watch from his pocket and placed it on the table. "You have 10 minutes, he said. David finally opened the envelope. Inside were property documents, share certificates, a proposed employment contract, and divorce papers already bearing my name. They had prepared everything. My throat tightened as I read the first page. They had even included language stating that I would leave the house within 72 hours. David turned slowly toward me. In that moment, I remembered every time he had defended me. I also remembered every time he had asked for more time. Every time he had believed his family could not possibly cross another line. I could not bear to watch him struggle. I stood. "You do not have to choose," I said quietly. Vivian's expression softened with satisfaction. I continued. "I will leave tonight." David rose immediately. "Camille, I will not sit here while they auction your life. This is our life." "It was," I said, my voice breaking. "But I will not be the reason you lose everything." Vivian reached for the documents. "Then perhaps we can resolve this respectfully." David placed his hand over the envelope before she could take it. "No," he said. The room became completely still. He looked at me. "Sit down." I had never heard him speak with such authority. "David, please." I sat. He turned toward his parents. "You want my answer?" Richard glanced at the watch. "You have 6 minutes." "I only need one." David picked up the proposed contract and tore it in half. Vivian gasped. He tore the share agreement next, then the property transfer, then the divorce papers. He continued until pieces of cream-colored paper covered the table. Claire whispered his name. Richard's face darkened. "You have no idea what you are throwing away." David looked directly at him. "I know exactly what I'm throwing away." He reached into his jacket and removed a small recording device. The color drained from Richard's face. David placed it beside the torn documents. "For the last 6 weeks, my attorney has been collecting evidence of forged signatures, fraudulent property transactions, unauthorized loans, and misuse of company funds." Claire's husband stood abruptly. David looked at him. "Sit down, Paul. Your name appears on 3 of the shell companies." Paul lowered himself back into the chair. Vivian's voice trembled. "You investigated your own family?" "No," David replied. "I protected myself from people who used the word family as permission to steal." Richard slammed his palm against the table. "Everything we did was for this company." You placed millions of dollars in liabilities under my name. You would have inherited the assets. I would have inherited the crimes. Vivian pointed toward me. This is her doing. She has poisoned you against us. David stepped closer to his mother. Camille did not know the full extent of the investigation until 2 weeks ago. She asked me to walk away before she knew there was evidence. She was willing to give up this house, this money, and everything connected to the Bennett name so I could be free. He looked around the table. And tonight, she was willing to walk out alone because she believed losing her would protect me. His voice became quieter. Not one of you has ever loved me enough to lose anything for me. No one responded. David picked up the recording device. This conversation was recorded. So was my father admitting that my signature had been authorized on documents I never approved. Richard's anger disappeared. In its place was fear. You would destroy your own family, he asked. David shook his head. You did that long before tonight. Then he turned toward Claire. You knew about the ultimatum. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't think they would actually do it. You sat here and watched. I have children, David. Dad controls everything. Our house, the trust, the school payments. And that made this acceptable? No, she covered her mouth. I'm sorry. David's expression softened slightly, but he did not excuse her. Vivian stood. You will regret this when Camille leaves you, she said. Women like her always leave once the money is gone. I rose too. Women like me? Yes, she snapped. Women who enter families they could never build themselves. The insult landed differently than she intended. I looked around the magnificent room at the chandelier, the silver, the inherited portraits, and the torn papers scattered across the table. Your family built wealth, I said. But you never built safety. You never built trust. You never built a place where your own children could tell you no. Vivian's eyes flashed. My grandmother raised me in a 2-bedroom house, I continued. We did not have much, but I never had to earn the right to stay. I would choose her little house 1,000 times before I chose this one. David looked at me, and I knew he remembered the child's drawing from the night we met. The large perfect house. The small glowing one. The girl walking toward warmth. Richard told David he would be removed from the company by morning. David replied, I resigned this afternoon. That was the answer none of us expected. Even I did not know. He had submitted his resignation to the board hours before the dinner. Marcus had also delivered evidence to federal investigators and the company's outside auditors. David had known an ultimatum was coming, though not its exact form. He had already made his choice before we entered the house. He had chosen truth over inheritance. He had chosen freedom over power. And he had chosen our marriage without knowing whether I would still be beside him when the consequences arrived. We left the estate together. Outside, the night air felt cold and clean. I walked toward our car, but David stopped beneath the lights near the fountain. You resigned? I asked. He nodded. When were you going to tell me? Tonight after dinner. I wanted everything filed before they could pressure me into changing my mind. I stared at him. You should have told me. I know. Do you? Yes. His voice broke. I spent years asking you to trust me while I kept protecting the people hurting you. I thought defending you in the moment was enough. It wasn't. I kept asking you to survive a family I was too afraid to leave. Tears filled my eyes. You could lose everything. He looked back at the house. I nearly lost the only thing that was ever truly mine. Then he took my hands. I am sorry it took me 12 years to understand the difference between belonging to a family and being owned by one. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question I feared most. Did you choose me because you love me? Or because you discovered they were criminals? He did not answer immediately. I chose you the night we met, he said. I was just too weak to understand that choosing someone once is not enough. You have to keep choosing them when the choice costs something. That was the moment I began to believe our marriage might survive. The following weeks were brutal. Investigators searched offices at Bennett Coastal Industries. The board suspended Richard. Several senior executives resigned. News vans parked outside the estate. Newspaper articles described financial irregularities, forged documents, and possible fraud. Richard publicly blamed unnamed employees. Vivian told friends that David had suffered an emotional breakdown under my influence. Claire called repeatedly, but David did not answer at first. Then the bank informed us that our waterfront house belonged entirely to the family trust. Since David had resigned from the company, Richard intended to remove us. We had 30 days to leave. I expected David to be devastated. Instead, he walked through the house with a notepad, listing what belonged to us and what belonged to the trust. "The dining table is theirs," he said. "I never liked it. The bedroom furniture? Your mother chose it. The curtains? She chose those too." He looked at me. "Did we choose anything in this house?" I thought for a moment. "The blue mugs in the kitchen." He smiled. "Then we're taking the mugs." We rented a modest 3-bedroom home near the school where I worked. It had uneven floors, a small yard, and a porch that needed painting. The first night we sat on boxes and ate takeout from our blue mugs because we had not unpacked the glasses. David looked happier than he had in years. He began consulting for small manufacturing companies and helping employee-owned businesses improve their operations. We had less money, but he came home before dinner. He slept through the night. He started playing piano again, something he had abandoned during his years at Bennett Coastal. Our marriage did not heal instantly. Freedom revealed wounds we had been too busy surviving to examine. I was angry that he had doubted my suspicions about his mother. He was ashamed of how long he had accepted his father's control. We attended counseling and had conversations neither of us enjoyed. I told him there had been times I felt like his mistress rather than his wife because his real marriage was to his family's expectations. He cried when I said it. Then he listened. He did not explain, defend, or ask me to soften the truth. That mattered. 3 months after the dinner, Claire appeared at our door. She looked exhausted. She was alone. David almost refused to let her in, but I stepped aside. She sat in our living room and confessed that Vivian had interfered with our adoption. The room seemed to close around me. Claire said she had found emails while helping investigators review family accounts. Vivian had contacted someone connected to the agency's board. She had shared private information, exaggerated David's travel schedule, and suggested our marriage was unstable. The anonymous complaint had come from an assistant working under Vivian's instructions. David stood so quickly that the chair struck the wall. Claire began crying. "I didn't know then," she said. "I swear I didn't." "Where are the emails?" he demanded. She handed him a flash drive. I could not move. For years I had wondered whether I was paranoid, whether grief had made me suspicious, whether I had unfairly blamed Vivian because she disapproved of me. Now the truth sat on our coffee table. "She took our child from us," I whispered. David knelt in front of me. "No," he said. "She delayed our path. She hurt us. But she does not get to decide how our story ends." I wanted to believe him, but grief returned with a force that frightened me. I mourned children we had never met. I mourned the years lost to manipulation. I mourned the version of myself who had kept smiling through family dinners while Vivian quietly sabotaged our future. Claire apologized repeatedly. Then she told David she was cooperating with investigators. Richard had used accounts connected to her husband, but Claire claimed she had not understood the full scheme. Paul had moved out. Her parents had threatened to cut her off if she testified. "What will you do?" David asked. She looked around our small living room. "I think I'm finally going to find out who I am without their money." David did not forgive her that day, but he gave her the name of his attorney. That was the beginning. The investigation continued for almost a year. Richard was charged with multiple financial crimes. Paul accepted a plea agreement and agreed to testify. Several company officers were implicated. Vivian was not charged in the financial case, but the emails connected to our adoption became part of a civil lawsuit. Her public reputation collapsed. Organizations removed her from boards. Friends who had praised her generosity stopped returning her calls. She sent David several letters. He returned the first 3 unopened. The 4th arrived shortly before Christmas. There was no return address, but he recognized her handwriting. He placed it on the kitchen counter and left it there for 2 days. Finally, he opened it. Vivian did not apologize. She wrote that everything she had done was intended to protect the Bennett legacy. She accused me of enjoying the family's downfall and warned David that he would regret abandoning his blood. At the bottom she had written, "You will understand when you have a child of your own." David read the sentence twice. Then he burned the letter in the fireplace. By then, we had quietly restarted the adoption process with a different agency. We told no one outside a small circle of trusted friends. Every appointment made me nervous. Every phone call brought back memories of the first process. I kept expecting something to go wrong. One afternoon, almost 18 months after the ultimatum dinner, our caseworker called. A 7-year-old girl named Maya needed a permanent home. She had been living with foster parents after losing her mother. She loved drawing, music, and books about the ocean. She was cautious around strangers and afraid of being moved again. The first time we met her, she barely spoke. David sat at a piano in the visitation room and played softly. Maya watched from across the room. After several minutes, she walked over and pressed one key. David pressed another. They played a slow, uneven song together. I turned away so Maya would not see me cry. Our relationship with her developed gradually. We did not promise forever before the court allowed us to. We did not ask her to call us mom or dad. We simply showed up. Every week. Every appointment. Every difficult day. When she became angry, we stayed. When she tested rules, we stayed. When she packed her small backpack because she believed one mistake would make us send her away, we unpacked it with her and stayed. 6 months later, Maya moved into our home. The night before her adoption became final, she asked whether our house belonged to us. David smiled. "The bank owns a lot of it." She frowned. I explained that it was our home, and no one could remove her because she made a mistake or disappointed us. She studied my face. "Even if I get really mad? Even then? Even if I say I hate you? Yes. Even if I break something? We might be upset," David said, "but you would still belong here." Maya became quiet. Then she asked, "What if you stop liking me?" I sat beside her. Love is not the same as liking everything someone does. Love means we work through hard things without making you earn your place every morning. She leaned against me. It was the first time she had done that. On the day of the adoption, Claire came to court with her children. She and David had begun rebuilding their relationship slowly. There were boundaries now. Honesty was required. Apologies were followed by changed behavior. Richard was awaiting sentencing. Vivian did not know about Maya. After the judge signed the papers, Maya asked to change her last name to Bennett. David became emotional. "You can keep your name too," he told her. "You do not have to erase anything to belong with us." She thought for a moment. Then she chose a hyphenated name, joining the one her mother had given her with ours. That decision felt right. Family should add to a person, not erase them. Several months later, David received an unexpected invitation to speak at an employee meeting at Bennett Coastal Industries. After Richard's removal, the board had restructured the company. Employees had gained partial ownership, and a new leadership team had stabilized operations. Many workers still respected David. He agreed to attend but refused an executive position. At the meeting, an older employee approached me. His name was Walter, and he had worked at the company for 32 years. He shook my hand. "Your husband saved a lot of people's jobs," he said. "He believes you saved yourselves." Walter smiled. "That sounds like him." During his speech, David did not discuss the scandal in detail. He spoke about leadership and the danger of confusing loyalty with silence. A family, a company, or a community does not become strong because no one questions it, he said. It becomes strong when people can tell the truth without being threatened with exile. I watched from the back of the room with Maya beside me. She was drawing in a notebook. When the applause began, she looked up and asked why everyone was clapping. "Because your dad finally learned how to give a speech," I whispered. She giggled. Later, she showed me the picture she had drawn. It showed 3 people standing in front of a small yellow house. Above them she had written, "Nobody has to leave." I stared at the drawing for a long time. Years earlier, David and I had met beside a picture of a little girl choosing warmth over grandeur. Now our daughter had drawn her own version. Only this time no one was walking away alone. 2 years after the ultimatum, Richard was sentenced to prison. Paul received a shorter sentence because of his cooperation. Claire finalized her divorce and found work at a nonprofit supporting families affected by financial abuse. Vivian sold the Bennett estate. The legal costs, civil settlements, and company losses had consumed much of the family fortune. She moved into a smaller home near Hilton Head and lived quietly. Then one spring afternoon she appeared at our door. Maya was at school. David was working in his home office. I opened the door and nearly did not recognize Vivian. She looked older. Her hair was still carefully styled, but the certainty that had once surrounded her was gone. "I would like to speak to my son," she said. "Does he know you're coming?" "No." I considered closing the door. Instead, I called David. He came into the hallway and stopped when he saw her. Vivian's eyes filled with tears, but David did not move toward her. "I heard you adopted a child," she said. His expression changed instantly. "Who told you?" "Claire. She should not have. I only want to meet my granddaughter." "You don't have a granddaughter." The word struck her. "David, you do not get to claim her because of my name. You do not get access to a child you would have rejected if you had been given the chance." Vivian looked at me. "I made mistakes." I waited. That was all she said. No apology. No admission. No acknowledgement of the adoption she had sabotaged or the years she had spent humiliating me. David waited too. Finally, he asked, "What mistakes?" She looked confused. "All of it," she said vaguely. "That is not an answer. I was trying to protect you. There it is." Vivian began crying. "I have lost everything." David's voice remained calm. "No, you lost control. Those are not the same thing." She looked toward the family photographs visible in the living room. One showed Maya between us on adoption day. "I am still your mother," Vivian whispered. David nodded. "You are. And I am still your son. But being related to me does not entitle you to enter my home, insult my wife, or influence my child. What do you want from me?" "The truth." She shook her head as though the request were unreasonable. David continued. "Say what you did. Say who you hurt. Say it without explaining why you believed you were right." Vivian remained silent for a long time. Then she looked at me. "I interfered with your adoption." My chest tightened. "I believed a child without Bennett blood would weaken the family." She swallowed. "I humiliated you because I believed making you uncomfortable would eventually make you leave. I blamed you whenever David disagreed with us because I could not accept that he had opinions I did not control." Tears ran down her face. "I was cruel to you." The apology did not repair the damage. It did not return the years or remove the grief, but it was the first honest thing I had ever heard her say. "I am sorry," she whispered. I looked at David. The decision belonged to both of us now. We did not invite her inside that day. David told her that forgiveness, if it came, would not mean immediate access. She would need counseling. She would need to respect boundaries. She would need to understand that Maya's safety mattered more than her desire to feel forgiven. Vivian agreed. For nearly a year, she communicated only through occasional letters reviewed by David. The letters changed over time. They contained fewer explanations and more accountability. Eventually, David met her for coffee. Months later, I joined them. Maya did not meet Vivian until we believed she could do so without becoming part of another family power struggle. Their first meeting lasted 30 minutes in a public park. Vivian brought no expensive gifts. At our request, she brought only a book. Maya accepted it politely and asked whether Vivian knew how to draw. Vivian admitted she did not. Maya handed her a pencil anyway. Their relationship remained limited. It may always remain limited. Some broken things can be repaired, but they should never be mistaken for untouched things. Our life now looks nothing like the future the Bennett family once designed for us. David never returned to the company. He opened a consulting firm that helps family-owned businesses create ethical leadership and succession plans. He jokes that he is professionally qualified because he has witnessed nearly every mistake a family company can make. I became the director of student support services for our school district. The mentorship program I started after my grandmother's death expanded into 6 schools. Maya is 11 now. She plays piano badly and proudly. She draws constantly. She has filled our walls with pictures of homes, families, oceans, and people holding hands. Sometimes she asks questions about David's family. We tell her the truth in ways she can understand. We tell her that money can make life easier but cannot make people kind. We tell her that relatives are important, but no person has the right to harm you simply because you share blood. We tell her that love without respect becomes control. Most importantly, we tell her she never has to compete for her place in our home. On our anniversary last year, David took me back to the community center where we met. The original drawing of the 2 houses still hung on the wall. The paper had faded slightly, but the image remained clear. The large white house stood perfect and cold on one side. The small yellow house glowed on the other. The little girl walked toward the light. David stood beside me. "I used to think I was the girl in this picture," he said. "You were." He shook his head. "No. I think I was standing inside the large house, afraid to come out." I looked at him. "And now?" He smiled. "Now I know home is not the place that threatens you when you leave. It is the place that welcomes you when you return." That night, we went back to our uneven little house and found Maya asleep on the couch with sketchbooks scattered around her. David carried her upstairs. I gathered the drawings. One page showed our family standing beside 4 blue mugs. Another showed David at a piano. The last picture showed a dinner table covered with torn pieces of paper. 3 people were walking away from a giant house. Above them, in Maya's careful handwriting, were the words, "They chose each other." My husband's family once believed they could force him to decide between love and legacy. They believed their money made the answer obvious. They believed I would always be the easiest thing for him to lose. What they never understood was that David had spent his entire life surrounded by expensive things that did not belong to him. The company belonged to his father. The estate belonged to a trust. The family name belonged to generations of people whose expectations followed him everywhere. Our marriage was the first life he had chosen for himself. So when they placed that envelope in front of him and demanded an answer, he did not choose between his wife and his family. He chose between the family that controlled him and the family we were still becoming. He chose the small glowing house. He chose the woman sitting beside him. He chose the child we had not yet met. And for the first time in his life, he chose himself. Some people say blood is thicker than water. But blood alone does not create loyalty, safety, or love. Family is built by the people who stay without demanding that you surrender your dignity as payment. David's relatives gave him 10 minutes to decide whether he still had a family. His answer left everyone speechless. But the truth was simple. He did not lose his family that night. He finally found it. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. If David's decision touched you, tell us in the comments. Do you think he made the right choice by walking away from his family's wealth and choosing Camille instead? And if you enjoyed this story, please give this video a like, share it with someone who loves emotional family stories, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Your support means so much to us, and we truly appreciate every single one of you who watches, comments, and comes back for another story. Until next time, remember, sometimes the hardest choice is the one that finally sets you free.